My older brother, Uriel Ramirez, he passed away August 1st, 2023, so fairly recently. And unfortunately, it was due to alcoholism.
And yeah, it's so recent. It's not even like just barely into this kind of grief journey. And I think you mentioned too earlier that this was one of like the first big loss for your family. Is that right?
Yeah, so I've personally lost this kind of childhood friends, actually, that, I had known since grammar school. It's obviously they always say, right, your friends turn into your family, right? So those did hit, but, nothing close to this. My mom also had a partner that unfortunately passed away due to alcoholism as well. And
Oh,
that was about 16 years ago. So, it becomes one of those, you're just kind of going to auto mode, right? Unfortunately, when my brother passed, I kind of already knew what the unfortunate series of events was leading up to,
mm,
just because of the decline in health and just the random things that doctors were telling us, and you obviously hope for the best, and you just kind of push through it and you become hopeful and you pray, and you look for a miracle in a sense. But unfortunately, like in deep in your gut, you kind of understand that it's not looking good for them, right? In their
yeah.
last days, you just kind of take a look that, my God, like, if there is anything I could do, but then there's also that hopelessness, right? Because there's
Hmm.
really nothing you can do, right? Everything that you tried doing, yielded no results when they were alive, or when they were trying to kick a habit, and being the second person that we knew that close that passed away because of this issue.
Hmm.
It just kind of leads you to understand how big of a problem it is.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, for our Hispanic community, we see it so much, right? And
Really.
yeah, I mean, for us, it's one of those where, oh, there's family that unfortunately do have alcohol problems, but they're fine for years and years, right? And then selfishly, unfortunately, when my brother passed, there was that inkling of like, God, like this person is, in their 70s, they've drank all their lives and they're still kicking, like they're still there, like why take like from us, right? When you feel that you've already like taken so much, like why do you continue to take from us
Hmm.
in that same manner, in a sense, and it is sad, but you come to the conclusion that unfortunately people that, have a problem with substance abuse, there's only so much you can do, right? There's only so much you can do. There's gotta be something deep within them that wants to get better,
Yes.
and
Hmm.
if there isn't, unfortunate circumstances keep happening, and that was what happened. As much as we tried helping him, he went to rehab a couple of times in Mexico. He kept telling my mother, like, I want to go live. I want to go back to my country. I want to live there. And my mom said, fine, go, but it was trying one thing after another, just to see if just something stuck, right? If somebody told him something, we'd been in the US since I was 3, he was 5. So the first time we went back to Mexico, we were well into our 20s. The first time both of us went together to Mexico was after my stepdad, passed away. And it was one of those where you just, you want to feel that welcoming, right, from family. But at the end of the day, they're strangers, right? And our culture is so like family oriented. But when you grow up in the US and you're just kind of used to US culture, it's very hard to really feel that, deep to your core when you really didn't grow up with that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that was an effort for him to just kind of feel reconnected with those roots before we came here. And I feel maybe, where he thinks like, it might have not been the best decision to come here, right? To maybe reconnect again with his roots and find answers maybe that he was looking for. We don't know. But unfortunately, that yielded no results too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you said he did
Yeah.
that twice.
Yeah. Yeah. He was over there twice. Here in the US, he went to multiple AA groups.
Mhm.
He tried the church, a couple of different ones actually, and that also didn't help. So, I do feel at the end he was just tired, right? You just kind of see him and see his spirit, and it's just one of those where you just understand like he's tired.
Yeah.
His life hasn't been easy. You kind of give him, you know, props for trying, right? Because at least he got there. At least he got to the point where like he tried. But yeah, he just couldn't kick it. And unfortunately, because of that, me and my mom had to create space, right? In order to protect ourselves, in order to protect me, myself, my family. I have two kids, and a husband, and we live, in an environment where it's very calm. It's very, what I want to
Yeah.
call peaceful, structured, so he was just kind of one of those, you just never knew if he was going to be okay or not,
Mm.
right? So we had to create some distance. I did have to put boundaries with my mom, to tell her, hey, like, if you talk to him, if you see him, that's great, but I don't want to know about it, right? Because
Mm.
I'm a big empath. And if I know he's struggling, my first reaction is going to want to help, which is going to turn into enablement. Right. So unfortunately, because I had to create that, I did lose contact with him for a number of years, and our father wasn't in our life, but he was somebody that would randomly call me until I had to put that boundary with him as well because, the cause were just complaining about him, and I would take the stance of, if you're going to complain about him, don't call, right? Because complaining about him does nothing, right? At all whatsoever.
I am unfortunately very familiar with this. We have had a lot of drugs and alcohol in our family. And that whole idea of like having to put boundaries up, and I've watched family members who don't do that and how unhelpful it is for the addict and how unhelpful it is for their life. And I know it's hard. It's hard to be like, "Hey, no more," because we love that person. And I think like explaining it in a way of like, this is how I'm showing you love. I'm showing you
Exactly.
love by saying like you you have this thing, and this thing is not going to impact my life because it's not a choice that I made. And
Exactly.
when you go and you want to be sober, I will welcome you back with open arms. And I love you and I want to help you. And I'm helping you by giving you the space to go and do what you need to do without my interference. And it's sometimes I've seen family members who struggle really hard with that. And I've seen people do it really well. And, but yeah, so I'm very, very, very familiar. I mean, since the time I was born, there's always been drugs and alcohol in my family. Unfortunately, it's really hard to watch that.
It's so hard, and you deal with the guilt behind it,
Yeah.
right? Because obviously you love them, and you kind of understand why some people just can't let go because, regardless of everything, after he passed away, my mom, became very honest about everything that she did for him, absolutely. So I was not aware of, I want to say 95%
Wow.
of, the things. And I actually apologized to her because I put myself in her shoes at that point, and my mother has been the person that is, the grandmother that is there at birth, that's there for birthdays, that's there for school functions, that, she is the present grandmother that everybody wishes they had, right? So since I became a mom, my mother has always been just a constant present in my
Yeah.
life, my kid's life, right? So me putting myself in her shoes and then at one point realizing what she had to do in order to make sure I didn't find out in the ways that she helped him, my heart just went out to her, because I feel that her biggest fear was that at one point I was going to say, okay, then I can't talk to you anymore because you can't let him
Yeah.
go. Right. And I can't be in this situation. Right. And things like that. So I did apologize to her, and I said, "I'm so sorry for, like, unfortunately leaving you alone in all of this because I understand, like, I know a mother's love, and I know that it's unconditional,
Mm.
and I did let you do this by yourself. I understood why, I didn't regret doing it because obviously as a mom, like, I had a family to protect myself, but I did apologize to her, and I feel that the guilt that she felt, in one way or another in regards to his alcoholism, right? Might have also been the reason why she just couldn't let go, right? Because she was a single mom and, she in some way, shape, or form, I feel that she felt responsible for where he was at,
What do you think uh some different choices or actions would have been if you had to redo it then with your mom?
I think I would have still had the boundary of I don't wanna know, but I wouldn't have been so rigid on, "If I help you, you can't help him." Right? Because even little things, financial situations where I've always tried my best to make sure she was okay financially, she had no worries, and she just lived a calm, just fruitful life, and, you know, knowing that obviously me helping her financially meant that she could help him financially.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that where I would have come in would have just been like, "Listen, like, I don't care what you do with my help, as long as you're okay," right? In essence, like, don't struggle, don't worry about, "Oh my god, what's gonna happen if she finds out?"
Yeah.
Right? You're a mom, and if you choose to keep helping him, go ahead. But I was very rigid, CJ. I was like, I don't want you helping him. He needs to understand, like, this is taking his family, this is taking just like everything away from him, like something's gotta click, And yeah, and I think that at some point, so unfortunately, we found out when we were actually on vacation in Mexico that he was in the hospital and it was a suicide attempt.
Uh,
Right. So he did always state how lonely he felt, right? I feel that to a point it might have become even like a way to manipulate the situation. But he would tell my mom, when I call you, please make sure you answer because that means that, I need somebody to talk to. So my mom would try her best to answer, but if she was at my house, she couldn't, right? So that's what I meant. Like it became very like me having to like kind of backtrack and realize like what she had to go through as well with my decision to just not know, right? To just not know. So unfortunately, he it was an attempted suicide. We didn't know it was my mom didn't know either the extent of it, but he had cirrhosis. He had been diagnosed with
mm,
cirrhosis in January of 2023. And then his attempted suicide was in June of 2023. And then we pretty much, came back. It was like towards the end of June. We get the phone call. We rush back. We're by his side right before July 4th. And then, just in and out of the hospital, in and out of the hospital, in and out of the hospital after that. When he left the ICU, one of the doctors made a comment of, Uriel, who would have known that, family was all you needed, right? Because I guess it had been so hard for them to just stabilize him that as soon as we got there, things just started to progress to like a
wow.
positive, right? Yes. So that hits
Yeah.
home, right? As the only family he had, there was only three of us. It was my mom, him, and I. So we kind of took care of him and well, took care of him. My mom, stayed with him in his apartment for those 30 days in July. And then, unfortunately, the end of July, he goes into the hospital. They tell us he needs to go into hospice, because we were very, is he going to get better? Is he not? They did tell us he needs a liver transplant. Unfortunately, it's decompensated cirrhosis, right? So he's deteriorating. And because of his alcoholism, he doesn't qualify for a transplant. My mom and I were even, can you test us? Like, can he get like, part of our livers? Like, we've heard of like live liver donors and the doctors, I got to give it to them because I can only imagine what it means to talk to a family that has just feels so much hope and they actually knowing that things are just not good, you know? So they were very honest with us. So I'll always give them that, and they were like, unfortunately, they won't even approve it, right? Even if you are willingly donating like part of your liver, like the board is not going to approve it. He's an alcoholic, and they won't even put him on a list
Wow.
at this point. So at that point, we were just kind of like, okay, well, just hopeful, right? Hopeful, 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 hoping for a miracle, right? But at the end, we just kind of knew.
So what was the experience of not having him in your life and kind of, putting up those healthy boundaries and then getting that call and now spending, 6 weeks with him in and out of the hospital? Like what was the emotional impact of that?
It was really bad. It was bad and it was good because obviously, as you're grieving, you have all these emotions. So finally being able to see him, talk to him, have conversations, spend nights at the hospital with him, it was one of those, he was back, right? I remember my brother before he was an
Wow.
alcoholic, right? Because While unfortunately during his alcoholism, a lot of things happened between us that were not good, as tends to happen. He stole from me many times, and things like that. So being able to talk to him, to have that month with him, to actually, I feel like getting my brother back at least for 30 days, right? It was good. I feel like, for people that, are spiritual in any way, I do feel that, God gave, I felt that he was unjust in the beginning because I was like, how do you give him back for 30 days and then just snatch him? That's so
Yeah.
unfair. Right. And I was angry at that, but one of a very good friend of mine said that, I was looking at it the wrong way because, sorry, I had to look at it as God gave him those 30
Mm,
days, right? To
yeah.
reconcile and to really find him, which he did. He had prayers in his phone. He would sit and pray every hour. He would tell my mom, just pray, I'm gonna be okay. He would tell my mom, I'll be where he wants me, and wherever I am, I'm always gonna look after you
Mm,
guys. So just kind of giving her that assurance that he understood, that as much as he wanted to stay, if it was his time, that he understood it was, you know. So that after a while and understanding that it wasn't that it was unfair for me to get my brother back. It was really a time of reconciliation, and it was really a time for me to say goodbye with love instead of,
mhm.
just I want to say anger and unfairness that I felt towards it, right? Because it was, anger towards like, God, like why can't you just kick this
Yeah.
already? I he met my son when he was 7, and to me, it was like my son loves soccer, and it's like, why, my brother was an avid guitar player. He loved music. My daughter loves music. He was an avid soccer player since he was young. He was great at soccer, played soccer all throughout high school. And, it was one of those like, God, like, why don't you want to be a
Yeah.
part of this? Why don't you want to be a part of your nephew and your niece's life? You have so much to offer. You have so much to teach them, so it was finally, letting go of like that anger in a sense, and really understanding that, it wasn't his choice. It is a sickness, and some people do find the comfort and just the strength to kick it and really get better. And there are some people who have, stories that are beyond fixing to them, and as much as they want to, they just can't.
Yeah. I've seen the difference in somebody who wants to be better and somebody who doesn't. I had
Yeah.
two really stark examples of that, a few in my life, and you could tell somebody who genuinely is like, I am out of control and I can't do anything, but I so badly want to be better and they can't. But hearing you, and thank you for sharing and opening your heart. So I just want to like hold space for that. I really appreciate that because it really, it kind of hit me in the heart a little bit because my biological father, I he had left when I was very young, and I would only see him once in a while, like maybe once a year. And then once I became a teenager, like never saw him. And my whole life, I'm like, I just want my dad. I'm like, I want my dad. Like I have had an amazing stepfather, but I'm like, I want my dad. Like he carries my genes, and my family's like, oh, you do this thing. It's so much like your dad. And but he just couldn't be there for me. He couldn't be a dad. He had his own struggles and his own story. And one day, while my wife had just had her second or third reoccurrence, so she had metastatic disease, breast cancer. I remember sitting and I was actually writing this story about my wife and what it was like to care for her. And I get a call from him. And he's like, I need to let you know that I was just diagnosed with lung cancer. And it just hit like a ton of bricks. And I went out. I was in the other room. I went out. My wife was in the kitchen. And I told her, and she was like, "You need to go down there," because he lives in Florida. I'm in New York. She's like, "You have to go." I'm like, "I'm not going. I can't leave you alone with the kids. You have your treatment coming up. There's no way I'm leaving. Nothing's gonna happen." And she really encouraged me to go and gave me that space, and I did. And I'll never forget flying there, getting to the airport, and waiting for his wife to pick me up, who I didn't have a great relationship with, didn't really know her. She picked me up, brought me home, and I was working from home in his home office in Florida. And my whole intention was, I know what he and his wife are going to go through because I went through this. I'm just going to be there as one human to another to help him in his appointments, get him set up for treatment, and then I'll go home. So that was my intention. And so I'm sitting at the desk, like 2 or 3 hours go by, and I'm at the front of the house and I see his red truck screeching up the driveway. And I kind of paused. This is a man that has never really shown affection, never really was a dad to me, even the times that we spent together. And I hear the front door burst open, and all I hear is, "Where's my son? Where's my son?" And I hear him run down the hallway and he burst through the door. And I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. I just stood up and he ran and he grabbed me. And he's like, "I feel so much better. I can't believe you came. I can do this now. I can't believe you came." And we spent an entire week going to his appointments, going to work out together, going to this and that, and doing everything
Wow.
as a father and son. And the night before I left, I asked him and I said, "Why did you leave us?" And we talked till early hours in the morning. And we just sat on the
Wow.
couch and held each other and cried and forgave each other. And I had a dad for a year before he passed. And that's a long winded way to say that, like, it really touches home with me, your experience with your brother. And I had that same anger of like, why did I finally get my dad? I mean, he would FaceTime me and just watch me work and just be present with me. And I'm like, why did I get him just to lose him? And then to lose my wife a year after that. And it takes time and it takes work and energy, and it's hard to hear, but there is a gift in the tragedy. There's always a gift. And none of us would want that gift. We want our person, but there is a gift, right? You said
Absolutely.
there's that gift of that month, and I look at it, I'm like, I got to reconcile with my dad and I got to spend a year, and it just healed a part of me, that child part of me. And I think it's just so beautiful that you're able to see that. I think a lot of us
Yeah.
can't. It's taken me a while to see the gift in losing my wife, but all that to say, it's beautiful, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, and I'm so glad that you shared that. And I'm curious about the experience of having that anticipatory grief, because not only did you lose him, and then not only did you have the grief that surrounds the addiction and growing up and going through life in that, and then the boundaries, and then the grief of losing him and then getting him back and then losing him again permanently. What was the contrast of all of that? How did you work through that? Were you cognizant of that? Were you aware of that was happening?
I locked it up so far down, CJ. Oh yeah. Because here's a kicker.
Mm,
Okay, let me tell you something. The kicker is that my husband comes from a big family. Okay, my husband there's four of them, there's two girls, there's two boys, his parents are still together, right? They just celebrated 50 years married, right? So if I feel that if I would have allowed myself to really understand what I was losing, I wouldn't have made it.
wow.
Because to this day, it's really hard to be in family functions with my my husband's family, right? So to me, it just heightens my
Mm,
loss, right? Because again, the selfishly, the feeling of unfairness comes back, right? Of God, I had one, and and you didn't even let me keep
yep.
that one. Like, why? And then, obviously it's my mom, so I feel that, after that, we've just kind of clung to each other so hard because I know that if I would have when I first decided to put that boundary up, I didn't see him, but I knew he was out there. And there was always that hope, right? There's always that hope that, he's going to get better. And there's always that hope. You're not constantly thinking about him, but you're definitely like, oh, he's still out there. He's still out there somewhere,
Mm.
right? And when he's no longer out there somewhere, all of that just leaves, right? That hope is taken from you. The feeling of maybe one day, right? The one day is taken from you. Now you have to think about, well, my kids are gonna know about him, but they're not gonna know
Right.
him, and I would have loved for them to know him. So it's in order to survive, I feel like I wasn't really conscious of it at all. I buried it, and it was really just trying to survive after he passed away, making sure my mom was okay, right? Because I can't lose another one,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And she lost a whole son, right? A whole grown up in a sense. So as a mom, I'm like, I know I'm hurting as a sister, but I can't even compare,
Mm.
right? Through what she's going through because I feel that her hope was even bigger than mine, through all of these years, so it's been a journey for sure. It got to the point where I was just tired. It got to the point where I just needed to keep myself busy to just not think. And I still can't really be, around like family functions to that level,
Yeah.
because it still brings back just feelings of loss and loneliness in a sense, because I think that I don't think I heard about, just grief and sometimes how it hits you, but I don't think I ever realized or I don't remember ever hearing about how lonely it can feel as well.
Yes.
Just the feelings that you have because nobody else, unless they've gone through what you've gone through, will ever understand just how incredibly sad and just depressing and, like just it fills you with just sadness that you don't even know where to start to work
Right.
through it, you know? So it's very lonely when you understand that nobody in the world at that moment is feeling what you're feeling. And to even try to explain it's, you know, you can't, you can't,
Yeah. There's
you can't.
there's no words, and that isolation, that loneliness is so heavy. And yeah, that took me by surprise as well. I mean, the moment my wife took her last breath, it was like, whoa, this is wild. And then time goes on and everybody's back to their normal routines, but our lives have significantly changed and we're reminded of it every day.
Yeah,
That loneliness, it's so
absolutely.
crushing. And I think that part of that is that loss of identity of like, well, who am I now? Right. Like, well, are you a sister now? Like, what does that look like? And, reconciling with the decisions we made. I mean, there was years where I would just torture myself with, why did I do that? Why did I say that? I should have done this. Why I couldn't. I bet she was feeling this, and like just torturing ourselves, like, because there's nothing else. We can't go to them. We can't talk to them. We can't do anything other than feel that loss. And to not feel that loss, to not feel that loneliness, to not feel that sadness, that numbness, whatever it is, that's our only connection at that time that we have with them. And we don't want to lose it. I didn't want to. I'm like, I don't want to be sad. I don't want to feel this heaviness, but at the same time, that's all I have left of her. And what happens if I smile again? What happens if I laugh again? What happens if my life moves on and forward?
The guilt behind it too, right? The guilt behind laughing, the guilt behind having a good time, the guilt, I questioned myself many times of, I could have just talked to him.
Mm.
I could have tried to not make him feel so lonely. I could have helped with his loneliness, like just torturing myself, right? And then the having his constant smile in the back of my head because he had a wonderful smile.
Mm.
He was, like I said, he was a very charming, good-looking guy, and had a smile that could light up the room, very suave, had, like, a nice swag to him. So having that in the back of my head
Mm.
and wanting to stop and just cry in the middle of nowhere, but you got lunches to make. You got to go drop-offs to do, and you more than anybody
Yeah.
understands this, right? Where you feel like you can't get up from bed, but guess what?
Yeah.
Somebody needs breakfast,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Somebody needs breakfast. Somebody needs to, to get their shoes, help with their shoes. Somebody needs to get picked up from school, and I feel that that's why I needed to, even though he was there constantly every day, to really just lock things up for a bit to survive, because there was people that were depending on me,
Yeah.
not to mention my mom, right? I needed to watch after her 100%, making sure that, we went on walks, making sure that she was able to talk, making sure that we got her a therapist that speaks Spanish, which, by the way, did not realize how hard it is
Mm.
to find bilingual therapists. Finding a therapist that spoke Spanish that took her insurance, we couldn't. We had to actually have her talk to somebody from Guatemala.
Wow. Really?
Mhm. It was so eye-opening for me that we're specifically, good with grieving in a sense, right? That we're specialized in grieving. It was so hard, CJ.
Mm.
And, I'm like, that's there you go. Like, that's not something you think about, right? When you're going through this, you don't think that you might have an issue with finding bilingual therapists, at all whatsoever, as much as, you want to believe that there's abundance of everything,
Yeah. Exactly.
there really isn't. Same thing with, working when I was in the hospital with him and working, in the hospital, researching every day, what can we do to help him, holistic remedies, researching the medication they were giving him. He was getting labs every day. So me going in and figuring out every single medical term and what it meant so that I could know if his labs were coming back good or bad, and it was just so much.
Mm.
It was a roller coaster, and, you're grateful that he's still here and, you're grateful that you're still able to to hug him. Every time I left the hospital, he would yell until I couldn't hear him anymore. "I love you, sister." All the way from when I left his room all the way till, I got to the
No
elevator.
way.
And then sometimes my mom would see me through his hospital window and would mention like, "Hey, like, there she goes," and he would yell. My mom's like, "I don't think he can hear you. She can hear you, but I'll let her know you yelled," and I feel that, it was, yeah, "Love you, sisters" that I didn't
Yeah.
get, that he knew he can give me now, that he would scream at the top of his lungs, so I would hear him until I left.
Man, that is
Yeah.
beautiful. That is so
Yeah.
beautiful. I mean, what a gift that is. I just can't imagine. So I have a bunch of questions that are piling up in my head. The first one is just kind of the commentary of feeling that loneliness at family functions. Very normal. I experienced the same thing for so long where we would be, at birthday parties or holiday dinners, just our Sunday dinners, and all I'm doing is looking at the door and being like, "Where is she? Why isn't she coming in? This is so weird. She's supposed to be here." And it was just so hard to take, and I would just have to leave. I'm like, "I have to go home." And, I don't think people really understand that. Like, you just there is a sense of like, this is too much, and this is not the way things are supposed to be. And I don't want to see people being happy. I don't want to see happy married couples. I don't want to see families who have two parents. I just don't. And it's okay. Like, we're allowed to feel that way, and it should be acceptable.
Yeah.
But the one of the questions is, how has your relationship with your mom changed after going into the hospital and then having your brother pass? And now.
I feel that for her, the very present, real feeling of I can lose my daughter too
Oh, wow.
came to her. So my mom and I have always had this close relationship. It wasn't always like that. There's obviously, like, every family I feel like goes through this stage of, feeling abandoned. And, there were certain situations in our family circle that, I felt abandoned, my brother felt abandoned, right, by both of our parents, and we just kind of felt like we were left to fend for ourselves because we were no longer living together. We were both still under 20, and things like that. So the relationship with my mom started to become better, I wanna say about a good 10 years ago.
Okay.
So it did progress into just this very close relationship. It got stronger, a lot stronger. It got, she's at my house every day. She doesn't live with me, but she's at my house every single day for school
Wow.
drop-offs. I feel that my son is the one that is really, I don't want to say that he might have become just a replacement of my brother to her, but there is this just special bond between my mom and my son, just insanely. It's deep. It's deep. It's strong on both of their ends. Because my son will call my mom on any given Sunday if he's home and say, "Can you please come pick
No
me up?" And
way.
my mom will come and pick him up. Absolutely.
Oh,
He will play video games with my husband and then say, "Okay, I'm done. I'm going to," he calls her Maya, which is it's what he calls her. It's grandma, right? So he'll call her and he'll say, "Okay, I'm going to Maya's house now." And he will grab a phone and he will call her and say, "Maya, can you please pick me up?" And my mom will be right there. People he spends so much time with her, CJ. I mean, after school, when she's ready to go home, he comes and he asks, "Is it my decision to go to Maya's house or stay here?" And we always say, "Of course." So sometimes he'll stay home with us and then sometimes he will go home with her. And to him, he has 2 houses. He will, has clothes at her house. When she does laundry, she will do his laundry, some
yeah.
of his laundry that's over there. There is no clothes coming back and forth. She has a whole closet there for him, toys, whatever you wanna, whatever he's gonna need, his favorite snacks. And then, he comes home and it's kind of like, "Oh, okay, like, I'm home now." But then if he's with Maya, he's fine too. At some point, they had him, she has a partner, so they had him so often that people actually thought he lived with them.
Yeah.
And he went to school at my mom's house,
Wow.
by my mom's house and things like that. So their bond is definitely something that I feel like has helped
Yeah.
her. And at the same time with me, I feel like it's mutual because I told her, right? When my brother passed away, it was very lonely, CJ. And it was very lonely in the point where I had a lot of resentment towards a lot of people because I feel that, there was a part of me that wanted somebody to come save me,
Yes. Yeah.
right? And nobody got there. Right. There was a part of me, I took care of everything, right? Of my brother's funeral, going to Costco. I guess I bought clothes. I somehow found receipts after he passed away, and I don't even remember going to get funeral clothes, things like that, where I had a lot of resentment because I kept questioning myself of why did nobody come save us? Like, obviously my mom couldn't. She was completely incapacitated at that point, to do anything, so it was me. It all just kind of landed on me calling, the funeral homes and things like that, so it was a point where I looked at her and it was like, we got to take care of each other, right?
Mm.
Because it's just you and me, girl.
Yeah.
I was like, it is you and me. Nobody's going to come save us. Right. So we got to look out after each other. And yeah, since then, I feel that, we had created a bond before, but now it's just unbelievably stronger where, even though she's at my house every day, I still call her on Saturday and Sunday, even though, she's at my house every day, if I haven't called her by, lunchtime, she'll call me and say like, "Hey, like, are you guys okay? How's everybody? How'd you guys wake up? How'd you sleep?" Just to hear each other's voice, right? How long that's gonna last, I don't know. I don't know if it's just us, being each other's, like, security blanket
Yeah,
in a sense right now, but I do know that she is the love of my life. My mom is my girl, at 100%.
that
Yeah.
is amazing. I had a feeling that it strengthened after all of this,
Yeah.
but I definitely was curious about that. Uh, where do you think that emotion, that sense of I need somebody to come save me came from? Like, where was the root of that?
I think it came from just the sadness, the hole I felt in. Because I'm a fairly strong person. If anybody tells you, when my mom lost her husband, those years ago, I was the one that, took care of the funeral arrangements and did everything too. And he was actually buried in Mexico. So
Mm,
doing, all of like the Mexico preparations too at the same time, right? For him to arrive there with us and, at the same time that we did and all of that. So I think it came from a sense of I can't breathe, I can't sleep, I can't think. I don't know what I'm doing.
mm,
I was, like you said, numb a lot of it. So I think it came from the fact that because I consider myself a super strong person, a very independent woman in my own right, at that point I felt completely
yeah.
hopeless. And I was like, somebody needs to come because I knew things needed to get done. But I also knew I didn't have the strength, the mind, the logic, to do it, you know. So yeah, and then my mom asked me to speak at his funeral. And I'm not gonna lie, CJ, I was a little angry at that later because I was like, I can barely breathe.
Yeah.
Like, why do you want me to speak at this thing? You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
And then I'm a writer by heart. I love poetry. I love writing, so and she knows that. So I know that's where it came from, where she was like, "You're the best person to do it, right? Like you love doing this, and who else, who better than obviously his sister." But to me, it was like, I'm barely standing. What do you mean? And then I wrote the most, I feel like, generic thing in the world that I look back at it now.
Yeah.
And I was like, I I could have said the most beautiful thing in the world, and I just wrote what he liked to do, which everybody in the room knew. It was just
Oh,
like
that's
I was like,
awesome.
"I want a do-over."
Yep.
Like, you know what I mean? So, yeah, that was interesting. That was very interesting for me. Yeah.
I gave my wife's eulogy and I had so much pressure. So same thing, I'm a writer and I wrote about our journey. I wrote about my journey with my mental health. So I've always been publicly writing and I had so much pressure. So I think we did 10 days before from the time she died until the funeral. And it was like every
Okay.
night I was just like, okay, I'm going to write it. And then I couldn't. And, like there is physiological changes that happen in our brain when you're going through that early intense grief. I mean, like you said, you haven't been sleeping.
Wow.
I slept 2 to 4 hours a night for an entire year because I was tracking it. Like I would have to put the sink on to do the laundry and then walk away from it. And then my basement started flooding. Like there's just so much shit that you don't even think about because you're not even there, and like you said, I don't remember a lot. My sister would call and be like, "Where are you?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "We had a conversation yesterday." I'm like, "No, we didn't." But, yeah, I had to do the same thing,
Absolutely.
and I remember my heart was pounding waiting to get up, and I don't even remember giving it. We recorded it, but I don't remember giving the eulogy. I just know that I got up there, I got through it, and that was it. And I was so glad that it was over. But yeah, I definitely can relate to that sense of somebody please save me. But also the dichotomy of that with but I can do everything myself, And I was like, I would get angry that nobody was saving me, but then I would be angry that I couldn't do everything myself. And it's that push
Yep.
and pull constantly. And I was like, I'm going to be a mom and a dad, and nothing is going to change in our house. And my kids aren't even going to know that they lost their mom. And I'm going to do it all. And I'm going to work full time and I'm going to take care of everything, and that sense of somebody save me. And it morphed into, why did you leave me? I don't want this life. I didn't ask for this
Yeah.
life. And
Yeah.
I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. So
Yeah.
I definitely understand that kind of sensation, that feeling, those thoughts. Yeah, it's hard.
It's so hard. It's so hard, and the guilt afterwards, right,
Mm,
for having resentment towards
yeah.
nobody coming to save me, because then I look at their scans and I'm like,
Mm,
if I think about it, if I really think about it, looking at myself from their point of view, them knowing who I am and how I am a little bit of a perfectionist, if not a lot, they'll probably say a lot. I think it's a little bit, but that's a for that's a for temptation. What if they would have stepped in to help? Would I have allowed them to?
right.
Right? Would I have allowed them to? Or would I've had been this angry woman to say, no, I'm gonna do it because he's my brother and nobody else is going to do it but me. Right? They had this impossible decision. Right? So thinking about it later, I just kind of got to that conclusion where it was like, I'm sure there would have been people that would have happily come and cradled me and let me sleep for days, but they had an impossible decision to make. Like, do I just let her sleep for 3 weeks and really lose herself? Or do I let her get distracted to actually start living her life again? Because I promise you, CJ, if they would have let you sleep for
Yeah.
months, you would have slept
Oh
for
yeah.
months, right? I feel like I'm not even at the point where like I shower every day yet. I used to be an everyday shower person. Now, I promise you, I'm still struggling with that. To get up and to actually understand like, wait, we haven't showered, we have to go shower. Things like that where you feel like it's normal now, but it's like, is it though? Because you're never really going to get yourself back, right? And it's like, how do you accept and live with this new person that now, has this intense loss walking with them every day? How do you do that? How do you learn to live with them again? And how do you learn to accept that person again? How do you not get mad at her for breaking
Mm,
down in the middle of a meeting just because something triggered him? It was a big music lover, and in the beginning I couldn't listen to music. I would be driving and all of a sudden the radio comes on and I'm in tears and I'm uncontrollably having to pull over because I can't breathe, and having to have some grace for her, for that
mm.
new person is
Yes, it
hard. It's
is.
hard for me. It's really hard.
Same. Yeah, I've been railing against that for 4.5 years now. And I'd be in meetings at work, and I worked remote, so I just mute the camera, and I'm just sitting there crying my eyes out, trying to listen, or like wiping my tears in between
Yeah,
going to the next meeting. And I think, I mean, you said it so well, but it's showing grace for that new person that we've become, and finding and discovering who are they. And it almost in a sense feels like we become infants and we have to discover life again. Like, to me, there was no future. And it's not that I'm like bleak, it's literally, I'm like, there's no visuals, there's no color, there's nothing. I can't see it. I wish I could, but I can't. And I don't know who is looking in the other mirror. And that aspect of, still struggling to shower every day, so normal, because that's why, like, the simplest things when people are in that intense grief, it's like, eat and shower and sleep as much as you can, because we really do forget and don't have the energy to do it. And it was so bad for me
absolutely.
that I spent 4 years not thinking that I was depressed, that I was just anxious. And it was like, well, I'm anxious. I have to deal with this anxiety. And I mean, I've had 3 therapists at once. I've done every modality of therapy. I've done all these esoteric things, everything I could think of.
Wow.
And it wasn't until 3 months ago I have a new therapist, and I showed up one day and I was like, I think I'm actually depressed. I'm like, I don't think I get out of bed and I don't really enjoy anything.
Wow.
And she was like,
Yeah.
yeah. She's like, that was one of the first diagnoses that I had for you. So
Yeah.
it is that realization, like you said, it's like, well, we have to go and take care of our kids. People have animals to take care of. Like there's life that has to happen. So I think showing ourselves grace of like, hey, maybe there's more stuff that's happening here that I'm not giving space for.
Yeah.
So out of respect for your time, I have one more question for you. And I'm
Yeah.
really curious because I'm listening to you talk. You have been through so much and you have done so many amazing things. You have been through a really difficult situation. I understand that
Mm,
situation.
mm.
And I know the decisions that you made are not easy, like, not easy at all. And they have lifelong consequences. And while I'm listening to you talk and seeing the expression on your face, I just feel like there is such a strength there. And by strength, I mean, there's such an acknowledgement of what your life is now, an acknowledgement of the way that this experience has impacted you, and an acknowledgement of the responsibilities that you have. And to me, that's strength. The acknowledgement is strength.
Thank you, CJ.
So I'm
Thank you.
curious, what is your relationship with grief now?
I can't swear,
You,
but
yeah.
I respect it. I respect it, but I still hate it. I still hate it. I avoid it like the plague.
Ah,
I'm still there.
interesting.
I have been in therapy for a year now, and that was because I was spiraling last year. I was, I was putting it I was putting it aside and saying I don't have time for it now. I don't have time for it now. I have to shut down his life. I have to make sure I'm doing everything right because, I messed up something. I forgot. I think I was supposed to. Oh, it was his light. I had to shut off his light. Right,
Mm,
his light bill. Simple things like that. Where I had to shut off his light bill, and for some reason, when I went into the comment side, I chose the wrong date on when to shut it off, and I like hated myself for that for so long, and I was like, "See, that's why I don't have time to grieve right now."
mm,
Right? It was the I don't have time for you. I because I don't there's so many people that are depending on me. He's depending on me right now to shut down his life. These are really critical things, death certificates, social security, like everything, right? So I don't have time for you. I don't have time for you. I don't have time for you, right? Then comes January of 2024, and I was spiraling. I felt myself, I felt myself. I think I went almost 2 weeks without showering.
mm,
It was a mess. I didn't feel like, cleaning my house. I was doing it just out of, normalcy, right? But internally, I felt myself spiraling. I couldn't concentrate at work. I couldn't do mundane things for me, school things for the kids, things like that. So I finally decided, okay, it's time. We just have to take care of it, right? So started going to therapy, got all the tears out, got all of the sadness, got all of, um the resentment, right? Got out of the why me, right? But I'm still grieving. I still miss him. I have a picture in my house of him. My mom has his ashes. I will still kiss him when I get home, but I still hate it. I respect grief, but I still hate it. I haven't made peace with it,
mm,
and I still avoid it if I can. Like if I start feeling a certain way, I will sometimes talk myself out of it. I think that, right now with certain situations, and I do want to say this really quickly. So there have been some things that have happened in our house after my brother passed away that to me makes me understand that when we're gone, we're really
yeah,
not gone.
same.
Right? To me, 100% believe in that now. So whenever I'm feeling that way, I always sit and talk. I always sit and talk to him. and one way or another, I will feel like just the little blanket come over me, and that moment is gone, right? I'm back to being, to missing him, but no longer being in that just sad, like, dark hole, So yeah, so I haven't made peace with it. I really haven't. I still hate it, CJ. I don't know how long I'm gonna hate it for. I don't know, how long I'm gonna maybe be grateful that I can grieve. I know there's people that, maybe aren't capable of doing it. I don't know. I don't know, but I know that I still hate it and I respect it because I know what it means, and I know that, it's love, right? That's what they say, right? What is grief but all the love that, you had for that person? Because if you didn't love them, you wouldn't grieve them, right? But, yeah, but I hope one day I'll make peace with it. I hope one day I allow myself to fully, fully feel it,
Yeah.
and then maybe at that point, I'll finally be able to start healing a little bit, but right now, I feel like I'm still avoiding it a little bit, for sure.
I think the
Yeah.
the reframe of the grief is love for me that has worked so well, and I've said this a million times and I'll say it a million more, is that there is this container of grief, and the bigger we grow that container to contain our grief is an equal portion to the amount of love and joy and abundance that we can have, because they are the same container. They are the flip side of the coin. And the pursuit of healing is really just the pursuit of growing that thing around our grief. Because, like you said, it's always going to be there. And knowing that here comes that gift of, oh my gosh, I now have this expanded thing that is going to allow me to feel love to a greater depth than I've ever felt.
Wow.
And the whole things happening in the house that happened to me too. The electronics in the house started going haywire. And I was always suspicious of it. I mean, unexplainable haywire, not just like, oh, maybe there's a short, like horror movie lights
Mm-mm.
going crazy for very specific things that were happening. Or when me and the kids would be watching TV, the TV shuts off, comes back on with snow, shuts off, turns back on. And this kept happening over and over and over again. And for 3 years, 2 or 3 years, I'd have a few really trusted people in my life who are like, you need to go to a medium. You need to go to a medium. You have to go to a medium.
Oh,
I'm like, I'm not doing that
yeah.
shit. I'm like, I don't know what I believe. I'm like, I broke down every belief that I have. I'm not doing it. And I went
Yeah.
to, and it's a long story, but I finally did it last year. And the first thing that he said to me after a lengthy process when my wife came through was, she's coming through to you in electronics.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
wow.
And he was like, and your dad's coming to you
Wow.
with blue jays, and your wife comes to you with white birds, cardinals, and electronics in your home.
Wow. We got a butterfly, a monarch butterfly.
Oh, that's beautiful.
One. It's always one, and he always finds me outside. Yeah, and water.
Oh, no
Water, he'll
way.
turn on our faucet.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, in our kitchen. He'll turn on our faucet in our kitchen.
Yeah,
Yep.
it definitely has opened me
It's
up
so
to,
interesting.
okay, there's a lot of stuff that we really do not understand, you know?
Absolutely.
And like I've just had so many experiences now since I kind of like went down that path, and I could talk for 4 hours about it, but I I so I'm glad you brought that up, but the I want to know, so you talked a lot about you respect grief, but you're mad at it. You're angry. You still have that anger. And someday I'll make peace. What does making peace with your grief look like?
For me, it's accepting it.
Mm.
It's really accepting that this happened. It's really accepting that there was gonna be no other outcome, right? It's really accepting that I'm not weaker because of it. I am not, it doesn't take anything from who I am, right? It's really that. It's welcoming it and making peace with it and saying, okay, there's a reason why I'm here and it's okay, and there's nothing that you could have done to avoid me.
Mm,
Mhm.
that's a beautiful definition, and I couldn't agree more. And I am
Yeah.
definitely in line with all of that. And I really want to just tell you, you are not weaker because of your grief. If anything,
Thank you,
I
CJ.
think we have experienced things that make us stronger because we have to keep going and we have to endure in ways that people just don't. A lot of people don't have to. And not that I wish anybody would, I don't want anybody to experience the depth that
Yeah.
we have, but we all experience grief at some point, and ours
Right.
just happens to be now. But I am,
Too soon.
yeah, it is way too soon.
Too soon.
I am so grateful that I got to talk with you tonight and for you giving me that time and the space to hear some of your story, to see your energy, and I feel encouraged. Today was not an easy day, if I'm honest. I was really struggling. I'm exhausted. I've been working nonstop, and it's almost 9 o'clock. I haven't had dinner, and I'm like, I'm so tired. I just don't know how I'm gonna get through this. And I feel more energized, more encouraged, and I feel that I have a new resolve to continue down this path because I'm currently in the midst of the next iteration of my healing. So thank you for that
Awesome, CJ.
and for giving me that tonight. And I know that it's going to
And
help
thank you.
others. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the space as well. It's not an easy journey, but as you say, right, when you have somebody that can add a little bit, your box of grief, it's gonna stay with me. It's gonna stay with
Good.
me now.
I'm glad.
And I'll make sure it helps as
Yeah.
well.
Thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it.
You got it, TJ.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Day After. You can find this podcast and more at our website at www.thedayafter.com. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate if you could take a moment to leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts.